We are about to dive into one of the most remarkable wildlife stories of really the last century. Imagine a mammal so rare, so elusive, that for 90 years the entire scientific world had to rely on a single aging museum specimen just to prove it even existed. Our focus today is the Wondiwoi Tree-Kangaroo, Dendrologus mari. And this isn't just an exercise in taxonomy. This is a high-stakes ecological thriller about an animal that was officially listed as critically endangered, possibly extinct by the IUCN. I mean, that's about as close to oblivion as you can get. So our mission today is to trace its complete life story, or maybe its ghost story. We're going to find out what it means to base an entire species on one single body, how its rediscovery in 2018 completely changed things, and why its population now is so fragile that scientists are considering some really radical interventions.
Right, and what's fascinating, I think, immediately is just placing this animal in context. Tree kangaroos, the genus Dendrologus, they're already a pretty specialized bunch. They are macropods, so they're in the same family as the hopping kangaroos we all picture. But these creatures evolved for a life up in the canopy. They're powerful, sort of bear-like. They have these long tails for balance. And of course, they're marsupials. They're the acrobats of the tropical mountain forests, mostly in New Guinea and parts of Australia. And this one, the Wondiwoi, is maybe the most enigmatic of them all.
And when you say enigmatic, you really mean invisible. This isn't a creature that's spread out across some vast, easy-to-explore range. It's native to one specific place, these remote, high-altitude mountain forests in Western Papua, right?
Exactly. On the Wondiwoi Peninsula in northwest New Guinea. And that's pretty much it.
And that tiny area is the whole crux of the problem.
It is. If you look back at the historical record, so before 2018, everything, every single drawing, every description, it all rested on one single piece of evidence.
A single male specimen.
Just one.
It's just so hard to imagine science resting on one physical body for 90 years. What do we actually know about that original animal?
Well, we know the basics. It was a male, collected way back in 1928. We even know its weight. 9.25 kilograms, which is about 20 pounds. It was collected by the famous ornithologist Ernst Mayr.
Oh, wow. The man who later defined the biological species concept?
The very same.
So the person who basically defined what a species is struggled to find more than one of these things. That's staggering.
It really is. The species was later named D. mayeri in his honor, and after he collected it, that specimen was sent to the Natural History Museum in London. And for generations of scientists, that was it. The one and only physical proof that the species ever existed.
To be known only from a single museum artifact for 90 years, that really drives home the invisibility, doesn't it? It's almost mythological.
It is. And after its collection, it was formally described by Rothschild and Dahlman in a 1933 paper, and they featured it in their big 1936 monograph on tree kangaroos. But after that initial flurry of documentation, the forest just went completely silent.
Nothing.
Nothing. No more sightings, no photographs, no samples. A complete blank for 90 years.
That silence turned it into a ghost species. And we know its habitat so precisely, this montane rainforest, at a pretty high elevation, right?
Yeah, right around 1,600 meters, which is, 5,200 feet on that peninsula?
And what's the total estimated habitat size we're even talking about here?
It is staggeringly small for a mammal like this. We're talking about an area estimated to be only about 300 square kilometers.
That is a tiny island of forest in a huge, rugged mountain range.
It is.
And that scarcity, I imagine, is why conservation groups were so focused on it. I know Rewild had it on a very specific list.
They did. Rewild listed it as one of their 25 most wanted lost species. They had to categorize it as possibly extinct because, 90 years is an eternity in conservation. To find it, you just had to assume it was still out there, hiding somewhere in that little high-altitude patch.
So we have the ghost of the montane forest. And then the story just explodes. How did that 90-year drought finally break in 2018? And it wasn't some huge dedicated expedition, was it?
No, not at all.
The breakthrough came in July 2018. It was a British naturalist, Michael Smith, who was actually in the Wondiwoi ranges for something else entirely. He was investigating a group of plants, rare rhododendrons, in an area he just thought was botanically unexplored.
He was looking for flowers and, he stumbled upon one of the world's greatest mammal mysteries. It's often how these discoveries happen, that mix of serendipity and sheer dedication. So Smith was at about 1,600 meters altitude when he took it. The first known photograph of a living Wondiwoi tree-kangaroo.
I just can't imagine the shock of that moment. You go up there thinking about petals and stamens, and you come back with proof of a creature the world thought was gone. That has to be one of the best wrong turns in scientific history.
It absolutely redefined the species' status overnight. And crucially, Smith didn't just get the photo. His team documented evidence that the animal was still there, a sustained presence. They found scent marks, scat, and really clear claw marks on trees even higher up.
Higher up.
Yeah, ranging from 1,700 all the way up to 2,000 meters in this extremely steep forest.
That's a huge clue right there.
Yeah.
The question shifts from does it exist to how did it survive here? What is it about that 1,500-meter line that's so special?
It's purely a matter of access. Local hunters are active, and they do hunt the more common grizzled tree kangaroos in the lowland forests below that line. But the source material is very clear. They rarely venture above 1,500 meters.
And why is that?
Because the higher you go, the more hostile it gets for humans. The terrain is incredibly difficult. There's a serious lack of easy water sources on those high ridges, and the forest gets choked with these dense bamboo thickets.
So it's just not efficient for hunting.
Exactly. It's just too much work for too little gain.
So the altitude isn't just their home, it's a topographical fortress. They were essentially pushed into a refuge that humans found too inconvenient to bother with.
Absolutely. The habitat is their fortress. And there's a great quote from the monograph, Tree Kangaroos, Science and Conservation, that really sums it up. It says, while this has raised hopes that this species continues to survive, it also highlights the prospect that other species in similarly remote areas are awaiting rediscovery and protection.
That is a fantastic point, that hope generated by sheer remoteness. But okay, now that we know it exists, the hard part begins. Conservation. And that work is immediately complicated by this ongoing debate over what exactly this animal even is. Let's talk about that taxonomic debate. We call it Dendrolagus meri. But is it really a distinct species?
That's the million-dollar question.
Some authorities, like Colin Groves back in his 1982 revision, they called all these Dorianus-type tree kangaroos just subspecies of Doria's tree kangaroos.
Right, and that raises a really important point because whether it's a species or a subspecies, that impacts everything. Conservation funding, legal protection, all of it. The Dorianus type is a group based on morphology, on what they look like. They're robust, darker, with this dense, kind of shaggy coat.
So it made sense to lump them together when all you had were old museum skins.
Exactly. But now, more recent DNA analysis on other members of that Dorianus group, it indicates these isolated populations really are genetically distinct enough to be full species. Now, DeMari itself hasn't been in a dedicated DNA study yet because it's still so hard to get a sample, but the trend really supports the idea that it's unique.
So we have this animal that is almost certainly unique, but its official identity is still a bit ambiguous. And regardless of that, the conservation status is just dire, still critically endangered.
Yes, and the IUCN has this chilling assumption that if the species is alive, the population must be frighteningly small. We're talking less than 50 mature individuals.
50. That's it.
Less than 50. And likely still declining because hunting pressures, even if they're limited to lower altitudes, they still exist on the periphery. For a population that small, every single animal matters.
So is hunting still the primary issue, or does inbreeding become the even bigger, more immediate threat?
And that's the critical shift in thinking. The historical pressure, the hunting, is what forced them up into that refuge in the first place. That's likely why they disappeared in the 1930s. Now, tucked away up there above 1,500 meters, the threat changes from something external to something internal. When you only have, say, 50 individuals, inbreeding becomes the overriding concern.
Right. So if the population is trapped in this 300 square kilometer mountain box, you can't just put up a fence and call it a day. The conservation has to be incredibly precise.
Incredibly precise and culturally sensitive. You can't just airlift them out. The sources all suggest that the best strategy has to align with successful models like the Tree Kangaroo Conservation Program, the TKCP.
And what makes that model so successful? What's the template there?
It's all about the community-first approach. It involves getting local indigenous communities and researchers to work together. You establish conservation areas that respect local culture, and you make sure the benefits of that conservation flow back to the people who actually live there. It's the only way it works long-term.
But even with perfect local protection, if the gene pool is really that tiny, it's just a ticking clock, isn't it? Which brings us to the most dramatic proposal: genetic rescue.
Exactly. You have to consider proactive, almost extreme measures before the whole population just collapses from inbreeding depression. And genetic rescue is that measure.
Genetic rescue sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie. What would that actually entail for this incredibly isolated population?
Well, it involves carefully introducing a very small number of individuals from a genetically similar relative.
Not another Wondiwoi.
No, you'd find a healthy individual from a neighboring population of a related tree kangaroo, one that's still genetically close enough.
Yeah.
And you'd introduce them onto the Wondiwoi Peninsula. The goal isn't replacement. It's not even really hybridization. It's just about introducing fresh genetic diversity to counter that inbreeding depression. It is literally a rescue mission for the genes themselves.
Wow. So we started this deep dive with a single 90-year-old museum specimen, and we're ending with emergency genetic intervention for a rediscovered population. It's just an incredible journey that underscores both the fragility of life when it's pushed to the brink and the stunning resilience of nature when it finds that one tiny corner to hide in.
This deep dive really confirms that altitude is a global refuge. The steepest, densest, highest cloud forests, the very places that repel us because they're so difficult, are so often the final strongholds for unique life. The fact that the forest above 1,500 meters was basically off limits is the singular reason this species is likely still with us today.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to mull over. If the Wondiwoi Tree-Kangaroo managed to evade science for 90 years, in a tiny range of only 300 square kilometers, what other unique, critically endangered species are out there right now, undiscovered, or just thought to be extinct, hiding in New Guinea's vast, difficult-to-access high-altitude ecosystems? The Wondiwoi might not just be a rediscovery. It might be the first clue to a whole hidden world waiting up there in the clouds.